My wife wanted an open marriage for her affair with her boss, but now she's furious that I'm dating her stepsister. I 32 am, just your average American guy who grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood, never expected my marriage to turn into something so twisted. I'm the type who always believed in monogamy, in loyalty, in building a home free of deception. I'm not perfect, but I've worked hard to keep my life honest and decent. Yet, here I am, recounting how my wife, someone I trusted, shattered that trust and then spiraled into fury when I did something that caught her completely off guard. It all started about 6 months ago. At the time, my wife and I were living in a mid-sized home with a modest mortgage and steady careers. We both held office jobs in our respective fields. Hers was higher up the corporate ladder. She'd spent years at this marketing firm, climbing step by step, eventually becoming one of their reliable managers. I respected her dedication and was proud when she'd get home glowing from a big account win. I saw her as passionate, driven, and too devoted to her work at times, but I didn't mind. I trusted that it came from ambition, not something else. Then, she started spending more and more late nights at the office. She claimed it was crunch time on a new campaign. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? We'd been married for nearly 4 years. We talked openly about finances, future children, maybe moving closer to her family, so we could rely on them when we started trying for kids. I had no reason to doubt her. But one night, 3 months ago, she came home unusually late, smelling of expensive cologne that clearly wasn't mine. She looked flushed, kind of high on adrenaline. I remember asking what was going on. She said, "We should talk." That phrase can make any heart sink. We went into the living room, sat down, and she said something I never thought I'd hear. "I think we should consider an open marriage." She tried to paint it as a modern, progressive idea. She claimed many couples were doing it. She pointed to freedom, exploration, personal growth. But as she talked, I noticed her voice got tense whenever I asked why now, why all of a sudden. Eventually, she dropped the truth. There was someone specific she wanted to sleep with. Her boss, who, ironically, I'd never met, but I knew him by reputation. He was older, wealthier, recently divorced. It hit me immediately. This wasn't a general idea. This was her wanting to legitimize what had already started behind my back. She was essentially requesting my permission to continue an affair that I had just discovered. I remember standing up, fists clenched, asking her, "So, you're telling me there's already something going on?" She didn't deny it. Her eyes shifted away, and her silence spoke volumes. "We've been seeing each other, but not going all the way," she said, as if that made it better. She wanted to formalize an arrangement, so I couldn't say she was cheating anymore. I was stunned. My mind raced through possible reactions: anger, disbelief, heartbreak. Mostly, I felt betrayed. She argued I should be open-minded. She even added a twisted sense of entitlement. Since she earned more money and had better career prospects, she deserved more personal freedom. It was absurd. She framed it like she was doing me a favor by keeping me in her life, as if I had something to gain from allowing this intrusion. She tried to guilt-trip me, implying that if I refused, maybe I was too old-fashioned, too insecure, and she wouldn't hesitate to leave. That night, I didn't give her a final answer, just retreated upstairs in silence. I couldn't sleep. Everything felt unreal. Over the next week, I tried to rationalize. We were married. I had to see if there was any chance this could be fixed. But each time I confronted her, she turned the conversation around, accused me of being controlling or short-sighted. She practically gloated about this opportunity she had with her boss, as if it were some golden ticket to better connections at her company. It was nauseating. Finally, I found myself desperate, angry, and hurt enough that I did something out of character. I agreed to her open marriage proposal. I told her, "Fine, if this is what you want, we'll try it." I wasn't smiling. I was strategizing. If she wanted to open the door to others, she had no right to stop me from walking through it as well. She gave me a suspicious look, but her pride made her accept my compliance at face value. She probably thought I'd just sulk at home while she had her fling. But that was not my plan. Enter my wife's stepsister. We'd never been close. She lived in another state until recently, coming back only for occasional family events. Tall, confident, and sarcastic, Her stepsister had always been distant and a bit of a mystery. But coincidentally, she moved into the city about a month after my wife's revelation. We bumped into each other at a small family gathering and ended up talking more than usual. She mentioned she'd heard rumors about trouble in my marriage. I didn't confirm anything at first, just listened to her. She was perceptive, saw the tension in my eyes, and privately asked if I was okay. That's when I decided to be honest. I told her in broad strokes what had happened. She shook her head in disbelief, then said something that surprised me. If she wants to open the door, you should show her that two can play this game. Her tone was mischievous, but there was sincerity beneath it. She admitted she'd never gotten along with my wife. They had bad blood from childhood. My wife always tried to outdo her, always reminded her she was a stepsister and not fully blood. This had caused her stepsister a lot of resentment over the years. In that moment, something clicked. We can make a point here. My wife assumed she had all the power, that I'd just quietly accept her new arrangement. But what if I took control of my own destiny? I told her stepsister, I'm considering seeing someone else now that my marriage is open. She raised her eyebrow, smiling slightly. We didn't need to say more. We exchanged numbers that night, and a week later, after more late nights from my wife and more brazen hints that she was sleeping with her boss now, I took her stepsister out for dinner. When my wife found out, because I made sure she did, she lost it. Open marriage was all fun and games when it benefited her. But when she realized I had chosen her stepsister of all people, her eyes burned with fury. I'll never forget the evening I told her I was heading out and wouldn't be home for dinner. She followed me to the car, demanded to know where I was going. I looked her straight in the face and calmly said I was meeting someone special. She pressed. I dropped the stepsister's name. Her reaction? Rage. She tried to forbid me, tried to say family was off limits, as if moral lines suddenly mattered to her. I reminded her that she wanted openness, that she had no problem with forbidden fruit when it was her boss. But this was only the start. I didn't know how far she, and eventually her boss, would go to regain control. Nor did I realize how dirty I'd have to fight back to get what I truly deserved. My initial compliance was just the opening move. What came next would define my sense of justice. And, frankly, my wife and her boss had no idea who they were messing with. After that night of pure rage, my wife didn't waste time trying to bring her boss into the equation. She must have told him about me dating her stepsister, because suddenly I started getting strange calls, unknown numbers, heavy breathing, then a hang-up. I'd come home to find my wife smugly typing away on her phone, ignoring me. I tried to talk, to lay out some boundaries, but she brushed me off. We're open now, right? She'd say, venom lacing her tone. But beneath that fake confidence, I sensed her panic. She needed control, and I'd ripped it out of her hands. I expected her boss to just gloat on his end. He was the kind of wealthy executive who thrived on getting what he wanted. But when I made it clear I wouldn't roll over, things got ugly. One afternoon, as I was leaving work, an office job in a bland downtown building, I noticed a sleek black sedan idling at the curb. A man in a suit stepped out. He looked like a hired lackey, tense shoulders, dead eyes. He approached me, leaned in close, and whispered that I should respect certain boundaries. He claimed my relationship with the stepsister could damage my wife's reputation at her firm, and maybe I should reconsider what I was doing. I ignored him, walked away. This was a clear attempt at intimidation. Instead of backing down, I decided I needed to escalate my response. If they wanted war, they'd get it. I didn't tell my wife what happened. Let her think I was clueless. Over the next few days, I met discreetly with her stepsister. We got coffee at an out-of-the-way cafe, talked quietly in the corner. I think they're trying to scare me, I said. She rolled her eyes, not surprised. My stepsister's boss always had a reputation, she said, leaning forward, voice low. He's known for pushing boundaries. People in the firm talk about it off the record. The stepsister had nothing to lose here. She wasn't employed by that company. If this guy thought he could bully me into submission, he'd miscalculated. We brainstormed ways to fight back. My first instinct was to gather evidence, recordings, messages, anything that could be used against them if they tried something more severe. The stepsister suggested a private investigator she knew through a friend. I considered it. I wanted something solid before making moves. Over the next week, I played it cool at home. My wife strutted around, pretending she owned the moral high ground because I dared to involve her family member. She was relentless, tossing out backhanded remarks at breakfast like, "I'm glad you're enjoying your newfound freedom," her voice dripping with sarcasm. When I'd shrug and smile, it only made her angrier. She wanted me to cave, to break the arrangement, to beg her to return to monogamy, so she could feel superior. But I wouldn't give her that. Meanwhile, I knew her boss was pulling strings behind the scenes. My wife had mentioned he was close to a few local officials, just offhand comments she'd made in the past. I had no illusions that this guy might try more than just intimidation. So I took a precaution. I visited a lawyer who specialized in family law and personal protection orders. I laid out the situation in broad terms. My wife's affair, the open marriage ruse, the intimidation attempts. I wanted to understand my legal footing if things escalated. The lawyer's advice was practical. He said I should document everything. Keep texts, call logs, any notes of suspicious encounters. In the U.S., gathering evidence is key if I ever needed to file harassment charges or seek a restraining order. I did exactly that. Every weird call, I logged the time and number. I placed a small voice-activated recorder in my car's glove box. The next time the lackey approached me, I'd have evidence. I also mentioned divorce to my lawyer. Just hypothetically, if I proved adultery and harassment, I might gain leverage in negotiation. We lived in a no-fault divorce state, but evidence of misconduct could influence property division and spousal support discussions. I wasn't sure if I wanted to end the marriage that instant, but I needed a backup plan. My wife's stepsister and I grew closer. We never made it purely about vengeance. We actually enjoyed each other's company, quiet lunches, sharing personal stories. She revealed how badly my wife treated her when they were younger, always calling her the outsider, using any family event to show her dominance. When they were teens, my wife even sabotaged a college application the stepsister had worked hard on by misplacing recommendation letters. So this rivalry ran deep. For her, helping me stand up to my wife and this entitled boss felt cathartic. For me, it was a strange sense of karmic justice. Then came the next big escalation. One morning, I found a small envelope slipped under our front door. Inside was a note, typed, telling me that my actions would have financial consequences. It warned that certain career opportunities might disappear if I continued to embarrass my wife publicly. It didn't threaten physical harm directly, but the implication was clear: back down or suffer. I snapped a picture, sent it to my phone, and locked the original in a file cabinet. I told my lawyer about it. He advised being patient, letting them dig their own grave. There's nothing better than stacking up evidence. Over dinner that same evening, my wife tried to corner me again. "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" she said with mock sweetness. "Going out with my stepsister, parading around town?" I calmly replied, "It's an open marriage. I'm just exercising the same freedoms you demanded." Her jaw clenched. She wanted to blow up, but she held back. I think on some level she realized I wasn't the pushover she'd always assumed I was. Another week passed, and I saw the boss's lackey again, lurking near my workplace's parking lot. This time, when he approached with that smug grin, I simply activated the recorder in my pocket and asked, "Can I help you?" He tried subtle threats again. "You know, there's a line you shouldn't cross, especially involving family." I let him talk himself into a corner, calmly responding with non-committal phrases. He hinted at making my life difficult, rattled off names of local businessmen who owed the boss favors. Perfect. He was giving me the rope he'd eventually hang himself with. Once he left, I stored the recording safely. I had what I needed. Armed with evidence, I met with the stepsister once more. We decided it was time to give my wife and her boss a reality check. I had enough to go to the police if I wanted to press harassment charges. My lawyer had suggested sending a cease and desist letter first, making them aware that I wouldn't tolerate this. If that failed, he could escalate legal action. The idea of seeing that smug boss scrambling to explain himself in legal proceedings thrilled me. Before doing that, though, I wanted to confront my wife directly. This wouldn't just be a spat in the living room. I intended to show her that I knew everything, that I had evidence, and that if she and her boss didn't back off, I'd bring legal consequences raining down on them. Did I feel a bit ruthless? Maybe. But considering she tried to legitimize her affair and then bully me into submission, I felt justified. She opened this door, and now she'd see what awaited her on the other side. The night I decided to confront my wife, I waited until she got home, later than usual, probably fresh from her boss's bed. She strolled in, tossed her jacket on a chair, and poured herself a glass of wine without looking at me. I leaned against the kitchen counter, watching, waiting. Finally, she glanced up. "What's with the stare?" she said, trying to sound casual, but failing. I took a step closer. "I know about the calls. I know about your boss's attempts at intimidation. I know about the envelope under the door, the threats, the lackey following me." Her face hardened. I pulled out my phone and played a snippet of the recorded conversation. The lackey's voice crackled through the speaker, clear as day, making subtle but unmistakable threats. My wife's eyes widened. She hadn't expected me to gather evidence. She tried to fake innocence, shrugging like she had no idea what I was talking about. I cut that off quickly. "Don't insult my intelligence. You want an open marriage. You got it. Now you and your boss think you can bully me back into silence." I paused, letting it sink in. "It's not going to happen." She clenched her jaw. "You're overreacting," she said, voice wavering. "This has nothing to do with me. If my boss is acting out of line, that's on him, not me." But her eyes darted away, betraying her. I pressed on. "You're both knee-deep in this. I have enough to go to the police. I have a lawyer. It's only a matter of time before your boss faces legal trouble. And if you continue standing by him, you'll be implicated too." Her face went pale. For the next 2 days, the house was a Cold War zone. My wife barely spoke to me. She paced, texted frantically, probably trying to reach her boss. Meanwhile, I finalized a plan with my lawyer. We prepared a cease and desist letter addressed to the boss and, by extension, my wife. The letter spelled out everything: the harassment, the intimidation, the open marriage arrangement meant to cover an affair. My lawyer was careful and thorough. In the U.S., while adultery doesn't directly dictate divorce settlements in a no-fault state, harassment and attempts to manipulate a spouse through threats could influence negotiations. My wife would be wise to back off. I mailed the letter via certified mail, ensuring it would land right on the boss's desk. Not long after, I received a frantic call from my wife while I was at work. She never called during my office hours before. I let it go to voicemail, then listened. Her voice sounded desperate. "We need to talk tonight." I could picture her pacing, furious at being cornered. That evening, she confronted me in the living room, voice hissing through clenched teeth. "You're ruining everything. My boss is furious. He said this could damage my career. You're making us all look bad." I leaned back in the armchair and said, "Good. He deserves it. You both deserve it. You demanded an open marriage so you could sleep with him, and now that I'm exercising my own rights within that setup, you can't handle it." Her face twitched with anger. "You chose my stepsister. That's sick," she spat. I shrugged. "And you chose your boss. Was that any less twisted?" She tried switching tactics, her voice turning soft. "Look, maybe we can go back to how things were. Just you and me. No open marriage, no stepsister. Just drop all of this, please." I laughed bitterly inside, though I kept my face calm. Suddenly, she wanted to rewind and pretend she hadn't crossed every line. "No," I said simply. "I'm done being manipulated." The next morning, I heard from my lawyer. The boss's attorney had contacted him, sounding nervous. They wanted to talk terms, to clarify misunderstandings. My lawyer relayed that I had no reason to negotiate. I wasn't asking for money. I just wanted them to back off and face any legal consequences if they continued. The tension in their camp must have skyrocketed. A reputable marketing firm's top manager entangled in harassment complaints? That could destroy careers. And if the boss tried to retaliate, I'd have more evidence to bury him. Meanwhile, my wife grew frantic. She tried nasty tricks, texting my parents and claiming I was going off the rails, emailing a few of my coworkers to check in on me as if I had mental health issues. She even tried to suggest to mutual friends that I was becoming abusive. But I saw it coming. Before any of these lies could stick, I forwarded the relevant evidence to those who mattered, nipping her smear campaign in the bud. People who knew me well saw her sudden change of tune as desperation. Her stepsister, ever resourceful, played her own part in my revenge. She spoke to a few of the family members who once doubted her. She calmly explained what my wife had been up to, without exaggeration, and hinted that if anyone had doubts, I had proof. Family support began leaning my way. My wife probably assumed her family would side with her, but the stepsister's credibility undercut that. Now my wife stood cornered, not just legally, but socially. One night, the boss himself tried to contact me. A bold move. He sent an email, full of half apologies and half threats. He claimed we should handle this privately, that it would be mutually beneficial. I saved it immediately. Trying to bribe or negotiate in that vague, threatening tone would only add to my case if I took this to court. At that point, I didn't even need to respond. The letter from my lawyer, the recordings, everything was already in place. I realized something vital. All the power had shifted my way. My wife, who started this journey feeling so entitled to have it all, a stable marriage and a side fling with her boss, now watched everything crumble. Her boss, who thought his connections and money could scare me, now stared down the barrel of possible legal action. I didn't have to lay a finger on them physically. Just standing firm, collecting evidence, and calling their bluff had dismantled their scheme. In the following weeks, their world unraveled piece by piece. My wife grew restless and paranoid. She started behaving erratically, calling her boss at all hours, arguing with him about how he should fix this since he'd initiated the whole thing. I overheard heated conversations, her hissing into the phone, him probably trying to calm her down. The boss, cornered legally and socially, must have realized the delicate position he was in. A harassment complaint from a spouse, backed by recordings and a lawyer's involvement, would be disastrous. He was older, had more to lose, and his image as an esteemed executive couldn't survive that kind of scandal. Even if I never pulled the legal trigger all the way, the threat alone was enough to force him into retreat. Soon, I got word from my lawyer. The boss's attorney reached out again, this time with a tone of defeat. They offered to sign a formal agreement to cease all contact and harassment, to keep away from me, and to refrain from interfering in my personal relationships. It was essentially a legal surrender. My lawyer advised me that once this was signed, if the boss made another move, I could press charges immediately with a strong case. I agreed, on the condition that my wife also comply. No more intimidation, no more smears. With their backs against the wall, they signed. That same evening, my wife came home trembling with rage and humiliation. "I hope you're satisfied," she spat. "You've destroyed my standing at work." He's furious I forced him into signing this. I might lose my promotion or worse. I said nothing, just met her glare with calm indifference. She tried to paint herself as a victim, but I knew better. She wanted everything on her terms. Now, without leverage, she was stuck facing the consequences of her own scheme. The following week, I filed for divorce. We lived in a no-fault divorce state, but given the documented harassment and her admitted affair, I had leverage during negotiations. My lawyer made it clear that if she contested certain financial aspects, I could present the evidence of harassment attempts to the judge, showing her complicity. Our home, the modest savings, the car, everything could become a bargaining chip. She folded quickly. She agreed to a fair settlement, not the skewed outcome she initially expected. The process took its normal legal course. A few months for paperwork, mandatory waiting periods, a final hearing. By then, the dust would settle and I'd be free. Throughout it all, the stepsister stood by me. She understood that while revenge had been a catalyst, genuine companionship had formed between us. We'd laugh over coffee, talk about the absurdity of it all, and find comfort in each other's honesty. She never pushed me to jump into a new serious relationship right away. We took it slow, respecting that my marriage was ending. Yet, we enjoyed each other's company, and I felt more appreciated and understood than I ever had before. As the divorce neared finalization, my wife tried one last trick, pleading with me to reconsider for old time's sake. I calmly rejected it. There were no more illusions to maintain. With her boss silenced and the open marriage farce exposed, she had nothing left to hold over me. She couldn't stand the fact that her gambit backfired so severely. She looked at me with hollow eyes, as if trying to recognize the man she'd once controlled. But I had grown in ways she never anticipated. I learned to stand my ground, to use patience and strategy rather than anger, and to protect my interests without stooping to outright cruelty. Eventually, I heard that her boss stepped back from several key accounts at the firm. Rumors floated around about internal investigations. He wasn't fired outright, but his influence waned and future promotions would be out of reach. Even if no grand scandal broke publicly, the legal close call had rattled him. My wife would probably find her career path stunted, forced to rebuild her reputation without his support. Her entitlement had come at a steep cost. After the divorce finalized, I packed my belongings, moved out of that house, and left behind the bitterness. I moved into a smaller apartment on the other side of town. My wife's stepsister and I stayed in touch, taking our time to see where things might lead without the shadow of the past looming over us. We had nothing to prove to anyone. Looking back, I realize I emerged from a moral battlefield with my integrity intact and my dignity restored. I made a choice to fight back with the law, with evidence, and with quiet resolve rather than surrendering. The experience taught me that sometimes you must become the immovable object that outlasts another's arrogance. In the end, I could reflect on the cost of betrayal and the strength it can awaken. If you found this story riveting, if the twists, turns, and well-earned revenge kept your eyes glued, then hit that subscribe button. Let's just say, like this showdown, future tales might leave you with plenty to talk about. Subscribe now, and don't miss the next storm.